From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your Life podcast. I am your host, John Small. Very excited to introduce you to my guests this week, Ryan Chavez and Jack Stone. They are the hosts of the podcast Cannabis Connoisseurs. And with the help of experts and articles and their own personal experience, their podcast talks about how to use cannabis in a productive and safe way while sharing the many positive benefits of cannabis. We all know about those. Ryan and Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it. We are super excited to be here.
Super excited to have you guys. Always love talking to podcasters and cannabis connoisseurs. A little backstory here, maybe a little origin story. How did you guys even come up with this idea to start the show?
Ryan and I were in the corporate world. So I remember we're going to like a client meeting and I'm like, oh man, I'm stressed. It was a big one. And he's like, don't worry about it. And we're over here in suits and ties. Like it's corporate. We're meeting with big companies. And he's like, I got this. He's like, we're in Brooklyn. And he's just like, he opens up his like jacket pocket and he's got like 3 different vapes. And he's like, this one will make you feel chill. This one will make you feel extra chill. This is the one you want. Here, take this. And I did it and it like calmed me down. I'm like, wow. You know, every time I would chat with him, he'd just talk about, he's really into it. And I'm on the other hand, on the other side, I was doing a podcast studio with one of my partners at the company we're working with. And I was like, Ryan, you'd be really good at a podcast. And he's just like, I'm only doing it if you're going to do it with me. I mean, I'm a big advocate of cannabis. Definitely. Love it. Love everything about it. But Ryan, he takes it to another level. So I'm like, you know what? Let's do this. So we've been rock and rolling for what? I think almost 4 years now.
That's great.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, I sort of give a summary of what it is, but how do you guys explain to people what the Cannabis Connoisseurs is?
Yeah. So the type of show I always wanted was one that I didn't really feel like existed. And that was the concept of taking cannabis and utilizing it to optimize your day-to-day routine, which just didn't really seem to be something that you really would see whenever or wherever you would be looking for anything cannabis related. It was almost the complete opposite. And so I kind of fit this mold. I like Jack was saying, we're kind of coming from the professional world and no one would ever suspect anything, any type of cannabis usage from me. So, the whole point of the show is there's so many, what I found when I started doing my research, and I just dove right into cannabis, is that there's so many different applications to cannabis that we just aren't even familiar with, that I just kind of, I got sucked in and I realized that almost nobody is familiar with any of these applications and people need to know. And the reason why they need to know is because your life can be significantly better just by those little tiny incremental improvements that you make with cannabis. And so I just thought it was really important for this information to get out, this information of utilizing cannabis in a positive and impactful way, conscious way, right? And to be viewing it that way as well, as far as our collective perception goes. So that was really what I was looking for out of the show, was to help people utilize cannabis to get them to a better place in their life on a day-to-day, if they're looking for it.
What is the question for both of you, what is your personal background with cannabis? Like, how long have you had a relationship with cannabis?
I did it when I was like 17, where like a bunch of us were like, oh, let's go play football. And then someone like had like a bong and they're like a bong, like a glass pipe, and started passing it around. And I'm like nervous. I'm like, oh my God, I've never done this before. And then I tried it and I'm like, here you go. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I was like getting nervous and like, dude, have you done this before? I'm like, yeah. And I just started coughing my brains out. That's it. I've been doing it.
It sounds like a great experience that you want to continue. But you continued.
Too much.
Yeah. You continued. What about you, Ryan? When did you first discover it?
Yeah. So I discovered it when I was younger, but I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. I was scared to death of it, to be completely honest, not scared to death until I was in my 20s, late 20s and 30s, but just had zero interest. And it wasn't until really, I would say, my late 20s or early 30s was when I really started trying to find ways, or realizing there were other ways you can utilize it. And so I kind of dove in then. So.
Yeah. And then how do you guys use it in your life now? Yeah. Is it a daily occurrence? Do you use it while you're working to chill out?
So, yep. So I use it personally. I view it as a multivitamin, right? And I don't, and when I say it, I'm usually talking about a full spectrum high CBD tablet or gummy, or even honestly, what I really love to do is vaping whole flower. Not so much smoking whole flower, but vaping whole flower. You're getting every single cannabinoid, all the terpenes. You're getting everything, and it just feels more wholesome too when you're utilizing it in that way. So I utilize it every day. It's kind of what I do to help me set the tone for my day. If I'm trying to get all super jazzed up, I have something for that. If I'm just trying to chill and it's Saturday and I'm on the beach, I have something for that. So really just directing me in the way that, not controlling me, but just directing me, in the way I'm trying to go for that day.
How about you, Jack?
Yeah, similar. Like CBD is great. I feel like a lot of people, they'll do too much. They'll have this negative experience. Like one time they'll smoke too much, or and that's exactly what it is. Like they'll take a hit or 2 hits, and then that was too much, or that strain was too strong, or they didn't use it in the right method. And for them, it's like, oh man, it makes me feel lethargic. It doesn't make me feel right. I think it's just understanding your body and just really figuring out what works for you. CBD is a great tool. It really balances out the THC. THC can be very dangerous, but not dangerous, but too much THC.
We all know.
So
yeah.
So just the balancing act. But yeah, similar. I do some CBD in the morning. CBN, if I can't sleep some nights.
Yeah, I'm all about CBN. I had some CBN last night, actually. It just makes makes me have weird dreams. And of course, cannabis is different. Yeah, like crazy dreams. Tell me about like your most popular episode ever. You guys have been doing this for 4 years. You look at your numbers, or at least what are some of your more popular episodes? That's a good insight into what people are interested in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. Terpenes is what I've seen, and the endocannabinoid system. And those are like our second and third show or something like that that we ever did. So it was really kind of laying the foundation for learning about cannabis. And so I just find like we'll go through the stats, and people will still be going back to those first episodes, which I love. I love that they just still kind of, live on, because it means that, again, what we were doing from the beginning has been impactful, hopefully, to people. So,
yeah, no, it's interesting. Education. I mean, there's not enough out there, information. It's out there. And of course, we're both, we're kind of in the bubble, so we know that there's information out there. But I think for just people who are kind of casually interested in cannabis, they don't know that there's this. They would have no idea what the endocannabinoid system is or what terpenes are. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. Doctors don't even learn about it, right? And they're now starting to learn about it. Like that's a system that they never used to learn about, but in med school, it's now being taught, which you have to know about that system, because that's a system that regulates all the others in your body, right? And so super important for doctors to know that too.
Yeah, and it's relatively new it's relatively new, the discovery of the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in the 90s or something like that. Yep.
And it's interesting that you also mentioned terpenes. I noticed that like even when I go to dispensaries here in LA, a lot of the bud tenders are not really that familiar with like the terpene profiles of the weed they're selling you. And it's so important. I mean, is that something that you guys look at when you're purchasing? Like, do you know which terpenes interact best with your particular bodies?
I find strains that work, and then like those, like Jack Herrera is my favorite. You kind of know what terpenes are in there. You get pinene, and you kind of know what works for you. And that's what I do. I know Brian gets the whole science of it when he knows and what's in here. When did it grow?
I like the smell, right? Like I like smelling it, and that's kind of like an old, I guess, adage for cannabis world. It's like, if it smells good, right, it's something that you probably, your body is going to be very receptive of. So I like piney stuff too, because I do a lot of workouts, and pinene kind of helps open you up, and it's great for workouts, I feel like. And also at night, like I like limonene, like on the weekends, kind of like that fun, bubbly, like everyone wants to be laughing, having a good time, feeling relaxed. So I kind of gravitate towards those. And then I actually sometimes will take some lavender and I'll throw it in my grinder, and I'll throw some of that in there too, because that's nice at nighttime to relax.
Yeah, so it's true. I never really think about it as a smell. And I think people sometimes will think like weed just smells the same because they smell it on the street or whatever. But it has, especially in the combustible phase, it definitely has very unique smells. And In the old days in dispensaries, they would have it in jars and you would kind of like smell it. They don't really do that as much anymore, I think, because of COVID.
COVID. Yeah, no one wants to be doing that.
But they still, a lot of the really good dispensaries enable you to smell stuff. Do you guys ever partake in edibles?
I would say Jack is probably a bigger edible guy. I do it more for like the CBD gummies, but Jack, you definitely partake in it more than I do. I do a little cooking too.
I make edibles. Yeah, I do canna butter.
Oh, cool.
Actually, yeah, we had a big fan of the show that actually he grows. He has a cannabis farm and he makes his own farm butter.
Head and Heel.
Yep. So he'll hook us up, or I've made it myself too. It's not that hard to do, and you combust in the oven. You think there's a lot of steps to it. It's not that bad. It just, it's a little bit of a process. The wheat combusts in the oven, and then you let it stir and sit on top of the stove with the butter, and all the molecules like blend together. So, but it's fun. I love doing it. And then the best part is you're sharing it with friends and stuff. So cookies, I've done cookies, I've done brownies. I want to make fudge next. But yeah, no, I love edibles, because another thing too, if you don't want to ingest cannabis through the lungs, or if you don't want to smoke the flower, you could, or the vape pens, you could always ingest it with the edibles. Obviously, the biggest thing with edibles, you want to make sure like how many milligrams you can handle. Like I would start off with 50 or 100 milligrams.
Our mantra here is start low, go slow. Yeah, that's that's the WANA mantra, because I think most of us have had that experience of either thinking, oh, this is not really working, and then you eat a lot more, and then an hour later you're like out of your mind high, right? Yep. Which we've all been there. Or so you might as well just even if you don't feel it the first time around, okay, well, I'm going to take a little bit more next time and just keep nibbling away. It doesn't have to be a bad experience. I say, from somebody who's been on both ends of this, like I've had the worst experience and I've had the best experience. You guys mentioned early on, like, the word positive came up, like how to have a positive cannabis experience. Do you feel like there's a big stigma? I mean, I think you both live now in upstate New York, right?
Jack lives in New York City.
Oh, you live in New York City. Okay, you're still in New York City, and but you guys are in New York State, which is a progressive, somewhat of a progressive state. But what do you guys feel like? Why do you want it to be positive? Not that you want to be negative, but like, why is that a big point for you?
Personally, for me, it comes down to the representation, how we represent cannabis and how we utilize it will come down to how everyone else utilizes it, right? Yeah. And so my opinion is that if the world could be a much, much better place if cannabis was evenly and well distributed throughout the world, right? And so the only way that's going to happen is if people take cannabis seriously. And so the only way they're going to take it seriously is if there's people that can portray it in a manner that will help people gravitate towards that type of experience as well, right? And so when we're being positive and portraying the positive use of cannabis, my hope is that other people will see, wow, their life was here and they moved it to here with the assistance of cannabis, not because of cannabis only, but how it could be such a powerful tool with just amplifying that experience overall and making it a positive one.
What are people's biggest concerns when you talk to people about cannabis, people who are not already converted? Like, what are they concerned about, or what are their questions?
People sometimes will ask me, like, what if you get addicted? Like, what happens if you don't, what happens if you don't need it? What happens if you don't get to the point where you don't need it anymore? And I personally, what happens if, like, you ever run out of, like, do you not need water anymore at any point in your life? And that's just kind of how I view cannabis, because it helps with that balancing of the endocannabinoid system, which is so essential for, I've realized, every other part of my life. So that's my, Jack, I don't know what you think, but that's kind of my take on it.
People ask, can I get addicted on cannabis? Especially,
I think, I don't want to take it because I want to, I want to make sure
I don't want to be
like,
dependent on it. Yeah.
100%.
Right. No, I hear that a lot. And of course, the addictive question I hear sometimes from parents whose kids, like, I've got a teenage son, so I'm starting to think about that too. Everybody who I bring on the show says, oh, I tried cannabis when I was 16 or 17. I was like, well, my son is 16 years old. So I guess cannabis, I know he's already started. He's already told me. He tells me. But yeah, like, can he use it as a crutch or whatever? Can you be addicted? I think it's an important question. Maybe we're not the perfect people to answer.
No.
We're not doctors, although I've heard. No. And you just gave me an idea for a new podcast episode. I'm going to bring a doctor on and ask if cannabis can be addictive. Is there anything that surprised you about this journey that you've been on now for 4 years talking about cannabis, you ever get surprised by anything about cannabis? You learn something new that you had no idea?
Yeah, I think all the time. It's so easy to fall into this stigma where it's like, oh man, weed get you stoned and makes you feel lethargic. But there's so much to it. The CB1, CB2 receptors, the endocannabinoid system, like every day every time we do research, Ryan over here does a lot of most of the research. I was doing research on the history of cannabis, and they discovered it at the same time as tea. The same person back in 400 BC, like in ancient China, this guy, he discovered tea leaves. He was trying different herbs, and cannabis was some of it, tea leaves were another. And I'm like, wow. So tea got invented around the same time as cannabis by the same person. I mean, nobody knows for sure. This is all like word of mouth, but I thought that was kind of cool. So you never know. Every time we research, we learn something cool, I feel like.
I mean, I was just looking last night and I saw like new cannabinoids that are out, like HHCO and THCH is a new one, like brand new. Like
I know. Even TVC, THV. There's one that was shown to be effective in alleviating COVID.
Oh wow.
CBDA and THCA. I think
THCA. Yep.
Yeah.
Again, these are just early preliminary research, but yeah, these different cannabinoids that you learn about and they're just being isolated all the time, and so it's really important. And of course we don't know a lot about them yet. And one of the problems with marijuana not being legal nationally is that we can't always get the best research. We can't get the funding from the federal government that would enable that kind of research. So that is frustrating, but there's still a lot of great research coming out in Israel and Australia and different places, and even in America. So I like that you guys are on top of it. What is the source that you go to learn about cannabis?
So what I typically do is whatever topic we're talking about for that day, I'll just start researching it. I'll start with a Google search, and that'll lead me to different research, like usually PubMed or National Institute research. Or if we're talking about like anxiety, it'll be like a national organization that will deal with anxiety if we're talking about a specific topic on anxiety. So whatever it is that we're doing, we typically start with, my research will typically go to a general place, and then I'll kind of dig into the research, like the actual scientific articles from there. I take a look at those studies just so I can understand it, because if I don't understand it, I can't really do an episode on it, right? It's hard to do an episode on it. So, and I had a science background of some degree. I did a lot in college. Throughout my entire college career, I was in a lot of physics, chemistry, and bio classes. So kind of brings me back a little bit. It's nice.
Yeah. What makes somebody a cannabis connoisseur? That's the name of your podcast.
Yeah, we're trying to come up with a name that would be fun. And
Cannaseurs. I know that cannabis connoisseur, and then of course I hear this term Cannaseurs. They use
Cannaseurs. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like I'll interchange it sometimes, but I wanted it to flow nicely, right? That's first, right?
Yep.
And then also I just kind of wanted to show that it is a show about thinking thoughtfully about cannabis, which is really what it is. It's connoisseur is somebody who's really into a craft and kind of looking into it a little bit more thoughtfully. And that's what we try and portray on the show as well. With some fun also.
It's hard to spell. So we did run into that. I think our cover art was off for like a couple of months. We spent it. I'm like, my fiance, she did the graphic design for the cover art, but I'm like, I think
throw it under the bus.
Yeah. I think someone was like, and I didn't know. And like people were asking, oh, I can't find it. How do you spell connoisseur? And eventually we figured out, it's like, oh crap, though, we got to change the logo. But we call it the Cannabis C now to keep it easy. Like our social media handles, like Twitter, Instagram, our Gmail accounts, the Cannabis C, just to keep it easier for people to find.
Do you guys have any fear professionally of kind of being known as the cannabis connoisseur guys? Like, is there still, like, can that hurt you in a professional way, or like with the way social media is? Do you guys have any fear of that?
No, I kind of don't want to be viewed as like the end all say all of cannabis by any means, because I'm not. I'm more of like an enthusiast. I would say that we both are. We're enthusiasts. And so that, it's really like, I just want people to be just as enthused as we are, and to want to learn. I always say on the show, as soon as this show becomes as relevant as a show on water, then we've done our job.
That would be a fascinating show, a show on water.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
right?
listening to the Water Show. Yeah.
Exactly.
The water.
The Water Podcast. All right. Well, talk to me about, we always kind of end the show on how cannabis has enhanced your life. So I'll start with you, Ryan. How has cannabis enhanced your life?
Like in ways that I never, ever would have imagined. And, you know, I talk about this on the show too. I kind of went through a 10-year transformation in my life. At one point, I was very overweight. I was like 240, 50. I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am today.
Yeah, you're very svelte. And, I can just see you in your Zoom here.
Yeah, thank you. You. Yeah. And so it was just you know, I had to learn how to work out the right way, and I started a CrossFit gym, and then I wanted to learn how to take care of myself in a more holistic way. So I started yoga and meditation. I also had to learn how to eat better because I didn't have those good practices. But then what I found was to hold all of that together, the best way for me to do that was to cap my anxiety. And the best way for me to keep my anxiety together, like consistently, was and naturally was using cannabis. And I kind of found that after I went through that 10-year process. It was kind of just become, I've always the type of guy, or type of kid, I should say, that would run into a GNC and want to look at all the different products and kind of compare and contrast. And I was always looking for like that plant that was really versatile and very impactful at the same time. And it's cannabis. Like that's what I was looking for my entire life. I was told I was never able to really get my hands on because I could go to jail for the rest of my life if I did it.
Right.
And so I had a lot of issues. I was overweight. I was on 5 or 6 different medications. I was high anxiety. Drinking, was a big part of my life. And cannabis didn't solve it. And I always say it doesn't solve it, but it made that entire process a lot easier and allowed me to stay intact. And so it just keeps you in balance, right? And that's just kind of the best message, I think, that I can relay to anybody else that's looking into cannabis and how it's helped me.
How about you, Jack?
So I have colitis, and it's like an inflated colon. I get flare-ups sometimes, but so when 6 years ago I was diagnosed with it. I don't use the medications though, because I take CBD, a little bit of THC, I mix it up, and I don't have flare-ups when I'm consuming the CBD with the THC, like the 1-to-1 ratios, things like that. So I stick to that instead of doing and I'm not saying other people should do this. This works for me. Yeah. But using CBD and THC like at a 1-to-1 ratio, like it really has helped with with flare-ups and things. So there's that, and then the show in general, like it's really cool because a lot of our topics will pick something that people are really like asking us, like back pain. That was huge. Like, or just pain, cannabis pain, cannabis anxiety. These are other really, really popular shows. And you get messages from people. Like we get Instagram messages and emails like, oh my God, your show's changed my life. It's helped me out so much. It's like, it's really, really cool. So knowing that we're helping people with some of the topics we talk about. So it's cool. It really is cool.
So if people want to find the show, how should they, or find out more about you guys? Is there a website? Should they go to the podcast platform? Where should they go?
Jack, I'll let you take that. That's what you usually do.
This is our ender. Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, the cannabis in the letter C. On Instagram, Gmail us, thecannabisc@gmail.com. YouTube, the Cannabis Connoisseurs Podcast on YouTube.
Awesome.
Oh, and Spotify, Apple, the Cannabis Connoisseurs Podcast.
Well, Ryan Chavez and Jack Stone, thank you so much for taking the time to hang with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having us, Jonathan. We really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
It's fun to be on the other side of the mic sometimes.
It's fun to be on the other side. That's right. Thank you for letting us do that.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana, the #1 infused product in North America. Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, head on over to wanabrands.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, brands.com.